This video will show you the process to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. To start off with, I've got a quadratic equation that is factorable. So we'll solve this by factoring and using the zero product principle first, then we'll do completing the square. So this trinomial will factor into two linear factors. To get an x squared, I need x times x. Now I'm going to look at the sign on my constant term. This is a negative, so I know I have to have a positive and a negative in my linear factors. I now look at the sign on the middle term. It's positive, so I know the bigger number has to go here and be positive. If I consider the ways I can multiply two numbers together to get a negative 15, where the bigger number is positive, I can do 15 times negative 1 to get the negative 15. But if I add 15 and negative 1, I would get a 14 in the middle. So that's not the proper factorization. The other thing I could do is say positive 5 times negative 3. 5 times negative 3 does give me the negative 15, and if I add these together, I get the positive 2. So the 5 goes here, the 3 goes here, and that is the correct factorization. The zero product principle says if something times something equals 0, then one of them has to equal 0. So I'm going to write two little equations, x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. Solving these two little equations, I get my two solutions, x equals negative 5 or x equals positive 3. And I can go check that in my calculator. So I've already got the equation written here. I'm going to go to Menu, Algebra, Solve. I'm going to go grab that equation, and I need to tell the calculator what variable to solve for. So I'm going to go comma x, and the calculator agrees. X equals negative 5 or x equals 3. So we're now going to go solve that same equation by completing the square. So I'm going to rewrite this as x squared plus 2x plus leave a space equals leave a space plus 15. So I've really just added 15 to both sides of the equation and left spaces here. I'm now going to look at the coefficient on the middle term. It's 2. I'm going to half that to 1 and write it down over here. Now I'm going to take this number and square it. 1 squared is 1, so I added 1 to this side. I have to add a 1 to this side to keep the equation balanced. This trinomial is now the binomial squared x plus this number. So this and this are exactly the same thing. Then 1 plus 15 is 16. My goal is to get x by itself. So I want to break it out of this squared term. The way to undo squaring is to take the square root. Since I took the square root of the left side of the equation, I need to take the square root of the right side of the equation. I also need to put in plus or minus if I take the square root of two sides of an equation. The reason for that is I can make a 16 by multiplying negative 4 times negative 4, or by multiplying positive 4 times positive 4. And when I look at the 16, I don't know which way it was made, so I have to account for both. So this gives me x plus 1 equals positive or negative 4. The only thing I have left to do is add or subtract a 1 from both sides. So that gives me x equals negative 1 plus or minus 4. So that's really two equations. X equals negative 1 minus 4, which is negative 5, or x equals negative 1 plus 4, which is positive 3, the same two solutions we got before. Now we'll go on to one that is not factorable. And this is where completing the square really shines. I can tell that this is not factorable because 7 is prime. The only way to get a positive 7 here is to multiply -1 times -7. If I add those two together, I would have gotten a -8 here. The other way is to say 1 times positive 7. That would give me a 7, but if I add those two, I would get a positive 8 in the middle. So this is not factorable. I'm now going to follow the process. X squared minus 6x plus leave a space equals leave a space -7. So I've subtracted 7 from both sides, left a space here, left a space here. So I'm going to take half of -6 and write it down over here. So that would be -3. I'm going to square that number and add that to both sides. So -3 squared is positive 9. I added positive 9 to this side, so I have to add it to this side. So this trinomial is exactly the same thing as x plus this number squared. So that's x minus 3 squared is the same as this trinomial. And then 9 minus 7 is 2. I want to break the x out, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I need to add the plus or minus. So that gives me x minus 3 equals positive or negative the square root of 2. I now add the 3 to both sides, so x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 2. That's two solutions. X equals 3 minus the square root of 2, or x equals 3 plus the square root of 2. And then checking that in the calculator, I already have the equation in the calculator here, so I'm going to go Menu, Algebra, Solve, up arrow to highlight my equation, hit Enter to pull it down. Then I need to tell it what variable to solve for, so comma x. And the calculator gives the same answer, but it's in a little bit different form. So this one is x equals 3 plus the square root of 2, because order doesn't matter for addition. Here I'm going to distribute the negative sign inside, so that's x equals negative times -3 is positive 3, negative times positive square root of 2 is negative square root of 2. So we get the same two answers out of the calculator. And that concludes this video on solving a quadratic equation by completing the square.